Hello, everyone. For this segment of the Full Court Breakdown podcast, I'm joined by a voice that defined Boston sports for decades, as he was the part of the Boston Celtics radio team in the 80s and 90s, Glenn Ordway. Additionally, Glenn was a staple WEEI radio in Boston for 20 years, while also being the program director and host for his own Boston radio program on WEEI, The Big Show. Glenn, thank you for taking time to be here today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Zach. And I should hire you to do introductions for me everywhere I go, like the grocery store, to the registry, things like that. Yeah.
I'll take that gig. I'll take that gig. So I want to start off by asking you about this year's Celtics team because, of
Okay.
course, with Jason Tatum out, nationally their expectations seem to slip a little bit. But since December, they've been playing like one of the best teams in the league. Did you personally expect this from them?
No, no, I don't think anybody did. And if anybody is saying that they did, it was simply coming from, you're a fan and you want them to do well. So even though they're missing one of the top five players in the league, you're sitting there saying, "Oh, I still think they can win." No, I didn't. And my expectations this year, and I didn't think they were going to fall out of the play-in game. I thought they were going to be somewhere from 5, 6 to 10. All right. And the reason I didn't think they were going to fall out into the uh, uh, out of the playoffs and into the draft is simply because they have two or three really good players, and it's pretty hard to drop out of that. Now, if they had a major injury, let's say Jaylen Brown misses 15 or 20 games, they're screwed, and suddenly they're dropping down into that. So my anticipation was they'll stay in the hunt, they'll win some big games, they'll lose some games. They'll be 5, 6 down to 10. And if they lose a Derek White or Jaylen Brown for a long period of time, then there's a chance maybe you just throw in the towel at that point. This is a very good draft. And this is 8 or 9 players deep in this draft. Then you play it safe and say, screw it. We'll go for the draft and see if we can get into the lottery. But I think what has happened here is that Jaylen Brown has taken the challenge. Okay. What are you? Are you a one? Are you a 1A? Are you a two? What are you? He's taken the challenge, put it on his back, and he's had a phenomenal season. Derek White, I think, had difficulties earlier in the year because now suddenly he was being hounded defensively. So he couldn't get that shot off. The only shot he had an opportunity to get was that deep three behind a screen. And even then, he was not hitting those shots. But more importantly, and I've never been a big Joe Mazzulla fan, to
Mhm.
be honest with you. Mazzulla's done a great job. At the beginning of the season, I think I tweeted out, I don't give a shit how many games they end up winning this season. What I want to happen is I want to see Joe Mazzulla and this coaching staff develop a couple of role players off of the cast that they have. And now you bring Tatum back next season and you add another player, let's say a big through a draft or trade or whatever, and then maybe you've got something. I think Missoula's done that. I mean, he really has. When you look at it, they've developed at least a couple of players here. I never
Yeah.
expected that.
No, definitely. I mean, you look at the role players that they have, whether it's Jordan Walsh, Josh Minot, Hugo Gonzalez, their rookie, they've definitely developed some guys that in the future can now impact winning when Tatum comes back at a high level. So I think that's been a big
Yeah,
piece of them. And I like how you touch on Joe Mazzulla because it's clear that, the players love playing for him. They
yeah.
they get up for him. He motivates them well. I want to touch
Let me
on
let me
Jalen.
ask you this: did you
Yeah.
ever think in watching Jordan Walsh, and of course most of the time he was up in Maine, so we didn't see him, but did you ever think that Jordan Walsh could be this type of player? Because I didn't. I must tell you honestly, I never thought Jordan Walsh was going to be an NBA player. I thought he was, in between the G League and the NBA, and he's turned out to be a really good role player.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is that his offensive game starting to actually come alive here.
Yep,
I think
threes.
drafting him,
Yep.
it was big on. You could tell that defensively he really had some of the physical stuff that you need. He had the length, he had the size, but I think his ability to now space the floor this year. And not only that, I talked to Brian Scalabrine earlier this month on this podcast, and he talked to me a lot about how Jordan Walsh's IQ is helping him. And so I think his read of the game has
Yeah.
also helped his ability. And so yeah, I think I really couldn't have imagined that Jordan Walsh would make this big of a leap in this year. So it's tremendous for him.
Yeah, I think it's made a major impact. There are literally games that I've seen where I've said at the end of the game, you know what, Jordan Walsh was the difference in this game. He turned this game around, and he's ferocious defensively. He can guard guys at different sizes, which is very important in that league because you're switching so often during the course of play. And you're right, his offensive game, especially 3 point, especially from the corners,
Mm-hmm.
is now coming alive. So he is now a viable player going forward. Ugo, I think, still has to polish up his offense, but defensively, rebounding, he's another guy that you can see as a high energy player. If he can develop a consistent offensive game, then you've got another player there. Minot is in and out. There are games in which I like him. There are other games I think he's kind of lost out there. And Keita has, he's a backup center. That's what he is. Okay. And yet he's getting the most out of his ability and he's not hurting them. I'm not saying that I wouldn't feel better if I had a different center, a different rim protector out there on the floor. And he's not that big either, but he's getting the most out of his ability. He's not hurting them.
Yeah. Kata's played well in his role. I like what you talked about too, because I think at heart he is a backup center, but him
Yeah.
having to step up in that role, he's done a good enough job. He's done enough to keep the Celtics afloat. And of course, as the trade deadline approaches, there's definitely some players in the front court that they could add there. I want to go back to Jaylen Brown. You brought him up earlier, kind of talking about how that number one option. You've seen so many different number one options in your time covering the Celtics, whether it be Bird, Pierce, Jason Tatum, of course, now Jaylen Brown having a career best year. What have you seen that's elevated his game so much this year?
So I think it is just the ability to say, okay, the other guy's out and now it's on me. So he's become far more aggressive. And to me, the more aggressive he becomes, the less problems he has with ball control. Because the one thing that I still every once in a while comes back to rear its ugly head is that Jaylen Brown turns the ball over too much. And the more aggressive I think he gets, the more protective he is of the ball. When he's making that strong move into the lane, he doesn't lose that ball much anymore. He used to lose it all the time. And I think that was because, okay, am I taking the ball strong to the hole? Or do I have Tatum over here in the wing? Am I dealing it off to him? Okay. After the defense collapses on me. And so in his head, he's trying to figure out. I don't think he's doing that anymore because he knows he doesn't have that other guy and it's all on him. Now, I'm not saying there aren't nights in which he has a rough time handling the ball because I still think that's a weakness in his game. I think he had 7 turnovers the other night. It was a rough game for him. So he still has that issue. But I think there are parts of his game right now where that issue, it kind of goes away. It doesn't hurt them that much, and it's not like he's got great personnel out there in the floor. I mean, let's face it, you take Tatum away, you take the guys, Porzingis, other guys that they had, last year, Holiday, that were key players into their offense. And how much security is he going to have? Should I deal the ball to Jordan Walsh in the corner or should I take it to the hole? But I think he's starting to figure it out. He said it earlier on in the season. We're a new bunch. It's going to take us a while. I didn't necessarily believe him, but I think now I do. It seems to be falling that way. But I think a lot of it has to do with him and him figuring out who he's playing with out there in the court. So it's been a terrific year for him. And I think he needed this because I think he was one of those guys that maybe was underappreciated, underrated in the league because everybody said, well, screw it. Who are you going to guard late in the game? Are you going to guard Tatum? Are you going to guard Brown? I'm going to double on Tatum. I'm going to leave single coverage on Brown. Well, they don't do that anymore. And he's having a phenomenal season. Now, we have no idea what it's going to be like when Tatum comes back because I've seen this act before where great players come back. And again, you're going to go through a period where they have to try to figure out what they're doing. But certainly you're a much more talented team when you have both Brown and Tatum out there on the floor. So good for him. I'm happy for him. He's really emerged, and hopefully people recognize him with the All-Star game and All-Pro status. It should.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's had a tremendous year. The aggressiveness that you pointed out, I've always considered him to really be at his best when he's downhill attacking the
Yep.
rim, sort of
Yep.
utilizing that speed. So I think that's been a big part of his game. And like you said, it'll be interesting to see how, what happens when Tatum comes back. But I think the fact that they have almost getting close to about a decade of playing together in the NBA will hopefully really help them settle things in once he comes back.
So let's get back to the Jordan Walsh factor
Mm-hmm.
with Jaylen Brown.
Mm-hmm.
There are nights Joe Mazzulla can take Jordan Walsh and put him on the best offensive player on the other team.
Mm-hmm.
Take the pressure off of Jaylen Brown because now you need 30 points a night from Jaylen Brown and sometimes more to win games. Before you didn't need that because you had Tatum offensively. But now you can take Jordan Brown, you can put him on the best offensive player and say, Jaylen, we're going to give you a little bit more space out there on the floor to work. And I think that was a factor as well.
No, I love that you bring that point up. I think of, if you want to be a two-way player in the NBA, it's difficult because you have to exert energy on both ends. I think Mikal
Exactly.
Bridges is a good example of it when he was on the Suns and really was more of a 3-and-D type of guy. And then when he went to the Brooklyn Nets and he bumped up his scoring, but everyone kind of was on him that his defense dropped. But it's hard to maintain such a high level of scoring while also maintaining that high level of defense. So you have to give and take. And so I love that point where if Jordan Walsh is now impacting the game that way, it's going to allow Tatum and Brown to take some rest on the defensive end.
Yeah, it's a team game and everybody plays off of everybody else and you need that. And the other thing about this Celtic team that I questioned before the season began, and that is they were a 3-point shooting team. They were the highest output 3-point shooting team in the league. They still are this year, which kind of amazes me because they lost some key 3-point shooters. And so you wondered, is Joe Mazzulla going to change up what they do? Well, they changed up a little bit. They're driving, going to the hole a little bit more. I think that was part of the frustration of Jaylen Brown the other night. Why am I not going to the free throw line? What are these guys, this contact here? Because that's a bigger part of the Celtics game now. And there are nights where they only shoot 30. Now, there are other nights where they shoot 50, mainly because Pritchard is hitting, Hauser is hitting. Other guys are hitting deep shots. So why wouldn't you take the three if you can take it? You get an extra point out of it. And you can make more misses and still win games if you're hitting 3-pointers versus 2-pointers. So I think that all plays into it, too, in the style of play of this year's Celtics team.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And so it'll be interesting as the season progresses with Tatum potentially coming back, that looming. And I'm excited. I think this will be a fun year, especially considering what the expectations were at the
Yeah,
start
I
of
think it's an exciting year, Zach, because I don't think we know what to expect.
the.
I mean, we don't know what to expect when Tatum comes back. My guess is he'll be back this year, probably early March, let's say. But what is he going to be like? I'm not saying that he's not going to be able to revert back to the player he was before and be 100%. But how much time is it going to take him? Kevin Durant, similar type of player, took 18 months.
Yeah.
So, but he was a little bit older than Tatum was. I don't know. Tatum certainly is working very hard. I think there's evidence of that by the videos we see constantly with him working out. I think by next year, we should see him 100%. But I like the fact that if he's ready to play, and that's all that I hear people saying, well, they should hold him off until next year. Why? If he's healthy enough to actually play right now, even if he can play at 80 or 85%, why wouldn't you want him to get the reps right now so that he is in rhythm? And by next season, you're getting that 100% out of him. So, but I don't think we have any idea what to expect. I mean, this team literally now, when you look at it, it's not out of the realm of possibility. They could win the East. And I don't think anybody thought that. Now, the West is a lot more difficult, especially with OKC and now the emergence of San Antonio and Wembanyama, who's, changing the entire game. But I think we have no idea what to expect. They could get beaten in the first round of the playoffs, or they could win the whole East. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, definitely. They've got a high ceiling, but also a low floor when it comes to the playoffs. But no, it'll be exciting to follow them. I'm excited. I want to shift things here, and I want to talk a little bit about your career. As I mentioned at the top, you've done so much and have been such an influential figure in Boston sports radio. But the sports media business has always been so competitive to get into. So I'm curious, how did you initially break into the business?
I started, believe it or not, as an actor. I was a drama major in college, and I started as an actor and did a soap opera, and I did a couple commercials, and I did an off Broadway show, and I worked in the acting business for about 2 years. I was big into sports. I played high school football in high school, and I loved all sorts of sports. I was a sports fanatic, and as I said, I played the game. Um, and at least on a high school level, I wasn't big enough to play beyond that. But I was employed for about 2 years because I was new, and you had theatrical agents who were saying, "Let's give this guy a shot. See what he's like." But after about 2 years, when you go through the ringer in that business, you either move to the next level and they love you, or they sit there and say, I don't know about him. And I certainly wasn't the lead role guy. Okay, they weren't putting me in any romantic scenes, and I was kind of the kind of the fringe guy, but I was still very young, and I looked younger than my age. So when I was 22 or 23, I was playing parts where I was 16 or 17. I was playing younger parts. And that didn't work well once I suddenly got a little bit older. So I was unemployed for long periods of time. You started working in a department store in New York City. I was running an elevator for a while. I was stocking shelves, doing whatever I could do. And then finally said, let me go back and take some courses at night at college and broadcasting courses because I love sports. And that would be a perfect fallback for me. And the rest is history. It was a great fallback for me, and I loved it. And I've had a really exciting and fun career, and I loved every minute. I never, to be honest with you, for a guy that's getting in the business like you right now, I never felt there was a single day I actually worked, like a legitimate job.
Mm-hmm.
It was just fun every day, and they were paying me to do it. And you put those two things together, and that's heaven. That's great. So that's pretty much how it happened. And I think a lot of people kind of fall into it different ways. I think you're growing up into a much different environment. Certainly there's, as you're doing now, there's the world of podcasting. There is an avenue for you to go out and actually do something on your own. So you don't have to wait until a company hires you. You can go and do something on your own. And then if you can grab enough people who are following you, then you can actually make a few bucks. But you can get noticed by people because you're out there, on YouTube, you're on different, different avenues. And so what happens is somebody probably will catch you and say, hey, let me give that guy a shot. We got a job here. It might fit this guy. So I think the world is much different now for you guys than it was, many generations ago. But with AI, it's changing like every 3 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you really have to
100%.
keep up with stuff. It is. So AI makes it a lot easier for you to do stuff. I'll give you an example. When I was doing Celtics games back in the 80s, and we were playing, let's say, the Indiana Pacers the next night, I would have a situation where I couldn't go to the internet and sit there and find out what was going on with the Pacers. I couldn't even get a roster on the internet because the internet didn't exist. So what I had to do is I had to call somebody in the PR department with the Indiana Pacers and say, I'm doing the game tomorrow. They knew who I was, voice of the Celtics. Would you do me a favor? Can you fax me some of the stories that have been written in the last 3 days about your team and fax me a roster and the latest statistics with your team? Could you do that? And they would do that, obviously. That's how I had to do research. Mm-hmm. That was how it was. You look at the difference today, and you're doing research. You just go to the internet. I can watch video. I can watch every single game the Indiana Pacers have played all this season. Mm-hmm. Every single game, every single play. It's so different. And you have so many resources and tools now that we never had, which makes it, I think, a lot easier. But on the other hand, it puts more people, I think, in the business. There are more people. You probably have more people right now that you're competing against that are trying to get into the business. So Zach, it is so much different than what it was years ago.
Yeah, definitely. It's competitive now, and the difference between just simply finding stats. I mean, nowadays you can do it in 5 seconds, whereas back then you'd have to literally talk to the opposing team just to get your hands on something like that.
To get
Um,
any information, you had no
yeah.
information. You didn't
Mhm.
even know. You'd had newspapers, so you'd have box scores from the game the night before, but that was it. I mean, and there was very little written about the team you were facing, especially when you're, probably a little bit more with football because you got a whole week leading up to it. But basketball, we were playing virtually, every other night, you
Mhm.
know, so a
Yeah.
lot different.
Mhm. So you finally broken into the business. I want to hear from your perspective. What was it like being told that you would be the voice of the Celtics? Because I'm sure that was such a surreal feeling. I'd love to hear that story from you.
So in 1978, I was working at a station and we had the Bruins and the Red Sox, both of those properties. And they put me on the Bruins broadcast. I was working with the great Bob Wilson, one of the all time great NHL play by play guys. And I was working side by side with Bob Wilson. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work side by side with two of the greatest in the business in Bob Wilson and Johnny Most. So I did that for 2 years. Um, and then Johnny Busick was retiring, and it made all the sense in the world. I had no issue with it at all that they were going to give Johnny Busick the analyst job because that was my job. Bob was doing play by play. I was the analyst. I was doing a lot of the pregame, postgame, in between the periods, and commentary during the game. Johnny Busick was retiring. They wanted to find a job for him. It made all the sense in the world. He became the analyst, and I was very friendly with Johnny after that, so there were no issues because I clearly understood it. And then I was back doing talk again at that same radio station, and then left that radio station. Had some issues with the Red Sox, who did not like some of the things I was saying, and almost got into a fight with a manager, Don Zimmer, at the time. Had to be separated at spring training, and then they fired me, and so I got a job within 2 weeks, which was pretty good, to another radio station. And that radio station, I was doing talk for the first year, and then they acquired the Boston Celtics rights for their games. Johnny Most was doing the games. He was doing it with a former player as well. And then the former player could only do it part time because he was also a teacher. And so he couldn't do a lot of long road trips and things like that. Johnny Most, who, you look it up, was one of the all time greats, and he was theatrical, and it was
Sure.
us against them, and the white hats and the black hats, and he had a voice like this, and he smoked about 3 packs a day and drank about 30 cups of coffee and never slept at night. And so anyway, he started to have some health issues. He had health issues the year before working at WBZ. Bob Lobel was filling in and helping him. And then Guy Manillo, who was a talk show host on WBZ, was also helping him out. And then they came to me mid-season, 81 season, and said, we got some issues, with our play-by-play guy, Johnny Most. He's having some health issues, and we need somebody. We love Johnny. We want to keep Johnny, but we want somebody else who can be in that booth and help him out. You've done some, and I had done, believe it or not, high school play-by-play in the past, both hockey and basketball. That was the reason I got the hockey gig with the Bruins, I think. And so I had a little bit of background in it. And so anyway, I said, hell yeah. Are you kidding me? Sure. And they said, we don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know, So anyway, my first games of working the Celtics was doing play-by-play, because for the next 7 years after that, I did a lot of play-by-play because John had health problems, but Johnny was mainly the play-by-play guy, and I was the analyst for those 7 years. but I broke in with the Celtics actually doing play-by-play because Johnny couldn't do those games. So, and then at the end of that year, thank God, knock on wood, they loved what I was doing, and they asked me if I wanted to sign a long-term contract doing this. And I was kind of the insurance policy, I think, at the time for Johnny Most, but they liked what I was doing, so why not? And I ended up doing that for 14, 15 years.
That's, I mean, awesome to hear, especially just sort of the grind through it, and eventually you were appointed the position. So
That's how it happens a lot, Zach.
yeah.
That's why when young people say to me, how do I do it? And the answer I always give is always be ready for the moment. You never know when it's going to happen. I can't tell you how many jobs I've gotten over the years where I had no intention. There was no, including the Celtics gig or the Bruins gig or even running WEEI. There was never a moment where I said, that is my goal. That's what I want to do. That's why you always have to be ready for the moment and ready. And it's like if you're an athlete, you got to work all week long to be ready for that game on Sunday. Well, if you want to be a broadcaster, you have to work your ass off to be ready when that moment comes so that you can shine in that moment. And when the moment comes, you can do what happened to me. And that is, we want to sign you to a long-term contract after I was doing it for like 3 months. So that's what you need to do. Be prepared. You never, ever know when it's going to happen, ever. And I can't tell you how many other guys I know that over the years, the exact same situation happened. Never expected it. Came out of nowhere. Boom. They suddenly have a long-term career.
I mean, no, that's terrific. And of course, yeah, you got to be ready for the moment. I love that saying. I think it's a great, because you never know when it's going to come. And so
it's like a backup player
awesome
on a team, Zach. You never know. Jordan Walsh, you never know when you're going to get the opportunity, but you better be ready.
Yep.
And apparently the kid was ready. And now look what he's doing. He's seizing on the opportunity and he's making, a career for himself. And there's no different in broadcasting or salesman or any other business. It's all basically the same approach. Why do you think so many guys who are in sports, Brady has done it, coaches over the years have done it, other players end up writing books about motivation? Because sports is no different than any other field out there. As I said, salesman or broadcaster or lawyer or whatever, it's the same thing. You're striving for the same goal. And getting there is basically the same process.
Yeah,
it really is.
No, that's terrific to hear, and of course, I mean, well deserved for you, I'm sure. I want to talk a little bit about your time, of course, broadcasting in the '80s. You're extremely active on Twitter. I follow you on Twitter, so I saw this come up.
I'm lonely. I'm lonely, Zach.
Hey, I love your tweets, so I wanted to bring one up because you talked about it. You quote tweeted the game where Larry Bird talked about only using his left hand, and he dropped a triple-double when he said, I'm saving my right hand for the Lakers. Talk to me about, getting to watch Larry night in and night out, because, I mean, I obviously never had the opportunity to watch him, but looking, I mean, just seeing these things, he seemed like the ultimate competitor, the ultimate trash talker, and the best part about it was he had the game to back it up.
So I argue this with young people all the time. And when they sit there and say, but could Bird play the game today? And I always answer, are you shitting me? I mean, think about this. Larry Bird used to win the 3-point competition every year during the All-Star break. But guess what? 3-pointer was not part of the game. Larry, go look it up. Larry averaged under 2 3-point attempts per game. And Zach, they were usually at the end of a quarter. They were 70 feet. They counted. It no longer counts. Thank God they've just changed that rule in the NBA. They don't count. So you can take the Peyton Pritchard 70-footers now, and it doesn't, if you miss, it doesn't affect you. But that's when Bird used to take 3-pointers. Later on in his career, he had back issues, and there were more threes taken in the game. But the guy could rebound. The guy was one of the greatest passers I've ever seen in my life. when people say well, but he's not a great athlete. Well, what do you mean when you say he's not a great athlete? He doesn't have uh, speed from point A to point B, or he doesn't have great leaping ability. Why is he such a great rebounder? And I would add, he might have the greatest eye-hand coordination I've ever seen of an athlete ever. And that is part of being a great athlete. Bird would average 35 plus points in the game today, because if you go back and look at his game and you change some of those twos to threes, so you get Steph Curry averaging, 12, 13 threes a game.
Yeah.
Suppose Larry did that. Larry would average 35, 36, 38 points a game. Here's the other one. I had an argument with a young person last week who said to me, yeah, I've seen all those Michael Jordan videos, but could he play the game today? And I'm going, oh my God. Michael Jordan was they used to have a thing called the Jordan rules. It was put up by the Detroit Pistons. So the way you stop Michael Jordan is you grab him, you hold him, you clutch him, you push him to the ground. Okay. You could get away with in those days. You go back and look at old footage of guys that were knocking guys out. And what did they get for it? Sometimes they got 2 free throws. Nobody ever got suspended. Nobody ever got thrown out of the game. Today, if somebody threw a punch at somebody else, Robert Parrish once knocked out Bill Laimbeer, cold cocked him, and got 2 free throws. That's what Laimbeer got out of the whole deal. Never got a suspension, never got thrown out of the game. The game today, and I'm not saying they don't play great defense, because they do play great defense today. And you have a lot deeper defensive rosters, I think, in the league right now. But in those days, you were manhandled, and that's what they would do to Jordan. Jordan, you look at Gilgeous Alexander, who goes to the free throw line how many times in OKC? Jordan would be going to the free throw line 16 times a game, and that would up his total. He would be up at 36 or 38 points a game. And they say the same thing about Magic, and I sit there and say, you don't understand. Those guys were playing within the parameters of the game at that time. Not only would they be playing in the parameters of the game today, where the three is not only a vital shot, it's of utmost importance. You need to be a team that shoots at a high level for threes if you want to win. But the other thing is the training would be different. Those guys didn't train the way the guys train today. They didn't have the facilities. The Celtics practice facility back in the 80s was a Greek college in Brookline. And during the daytime, intramural basketball was being played. So I'd show up at a Celtics practice, and the Celtics were standing around and would have to wait, looking at their watches for 15 minutes to practice, because the intramural college teams were playing each other. They didn't even have their own facilities. They didn't have their own training facilities there. And the locker rooms, Zach, it would be like the locker rooms weren't even good high school locker rooms. They were trash. This is the type of facilities and stuff that these guys grew up with while they were playing the game in the 80s. So, yeah, and that Bird night that you mentioned came out of nowhere. I've seen him in practice working with the left hand, because he was one of those guys that if you did something to him the night before, he was afraid it was going to get out, and he wanted to correct it and say, okay, if they're attacking my right hand, I'm going to, switch over to the left. But when I'm watching that game unfold, and like the first basket, left hand, and the second basket, left hand, and then, a 12-footer left hand, I'm sitting there going, what the hell is he doing? And it was almost like a mockery of the Trailblazers during the course of that game. And he had a phenomenal game. And then you're right. He came out after that, because the Laker game was the next game. We were on a long road trip out west, and he came out and he actually just embarrassed the Lakers by saying, I'm saving my right hand for the Lakers. And that was the type of trash talking that he would throw out there on a regular basis. But he could back it. But anybody that thinks that Larry, Michael, Magic, who saved the NBA, couldn't be great today, go back and watch some video, because they could be great. They would be great today.
No, it's a terrific point, because, like you said, they're playing in the parameters of the game back then, so they're living by those rules, and the game today is extremely different. Glenn, I've got you just for a little bit longer. I want to ask one last question here. You retired back in 2021, but like I said, you're still active on Twitter. From this conversation, I can tell you're still so passionate about sports. What keeps you still passionate about the Celtics today?
I I just have it in, I think, in my blood from doing the games years ago. I've just, it's funny because people knock me sometimes because I didn't talk enough hockey, and I was a hockey guy originally back in the 70s. And but I think once you spend 15 years with an organization and with a sport, it kind of gets in your blood.
Definitely.
And I did want to do other things in my life. I didn't want to do the same thing for, you know, 50 years. I had a 50-year career, but I did different things because I wanted to do different things. That was, I elected to do different things. Because I think you do get bored sometimes doing the same thing over a long period of time. You almost do it by rote as opposed to, okay, I need a challenge. I need to be able to do something that's going to really challenge me and change my direction and get to instead of staying in that comfort level, get out of that comfort level and, do something different. But there's no question I literally watch every game. And Zach, I've got plenty of time right now, though I am getting very, very bored, and you're probably hearing it from this conversation because my wife knows nothing about sports or very little about sports. But no, I still have a great passion for sports. I watch more games now. I spend a good portion of the year in Arizona, where I am right now, in Scottsdale. And then we spend some of the time, especially in the summer, back in our home in Boston. But I will say this, living out in the West Coast, the games are on at 4:00 in the afternoon, 4:30 in the afternoon. It's the greatest thing in the world. And then your West Coast games, I watch more games now than I've ever watched in my life in every sport. NFL games start at 10:00 in the morning on Sunday morning. And you got to get up and watch them at 6 a.m. if you're watching the games from Europe or whatever. But I just watch more games. So I watch the Celtics every single game.
No,
and there are games when they have big leads that I'll say, okay, I'm done with this one tonight. But I literally watch every single game. And my son, who actually is in college as a broadcasting major, he is a senior, and he and I talk Celtic. We'll talk. That's when we talk every day. We talk during Celtics games and go back and forth and talk about what's going on in the game. So it kind of connects me with my son as well, because he's a huge Celtics fan.
No, that's awesome to hear. I'm so glad that you're still connected to the game. Of course, I'm sure it was a big part of your life. I mean, just talking to you. Glenn, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. One of the most iconic voices in Boston sports history. I really appreciate it.
Zach, anytime. And good luck with your career. And remember, always be prepared. You never know when it's going to happen.
It's ingrained in my brain now. It's ingrained.
You got it, buddy. Good luck.
Thank you.
See ya.